Hey team, and welcome back to another video in our Astrological Magical Elections video series. It feels like it's been quite some time since I've done this. I hope I remember how. Since, last time for our Scorpio lunar eclipse, we skipped it because there weren't any electional opportunities for me to share with you all. And that kind of sucks when that happens. It can feel like there's just not really a lot going on, but I think that those are really great times to kind of take stock of what you already have, and kind of get a deeper relationship with those talismans that you may have already made. Now we have been rewarded for our patience, we'll say, in that today I have like a whole goddamn list of talismans to share with you all. Like, it's pretty long, so that's really exciting. I really enjoy these periods where they're busy, because I know that there's a lot of need for various things, or a lot of goals that we have that need to be accomplished. And so there's a lot of sort of perusing through astrological talismans to see what could be the best option for us to take partnership with to solve some of these. So I always really like it when there's a lot, especially when there's a lot of talismanic opportunities that are for different things, or can be applied to different kind of goals or purposes, just because I feel like that there's a lot for people to choose from who may be going through kind of unique situations or things like that. So I like when there's a lot, and I like when there's a lot of variety for individuals to be able to take advantage of, kind of no matter what they're going through. Hopefully in situations like this there will be something that they can utilize to make their journey a little bit easier. So hopefully that's the case for you, if you're here watching this to try to figure out what a good election for you to take advantage of is coming up to help deal with your situation. But yeah, we've got a decent amount to go through, and it's not super unsurprising that this happens with the waxing moon, because waxing moons, especially with lunar mansions, tend to be utilized for kind of augmentation, for growth, and for gain, which is, of course, what many of us come to magic for, is to augment and change and gain and acquire things. There's no judgment with that. It's just some human nature. And so when we have those times where that line up, but also provide a good amount of different variety talismans to pick from, it always feels like a really great time, especially following kind of like a difficult time. But all right, enough kind of prattling on about that, about how many election opportunities we have. He said being concerned he doesn't have the energy to get through it all tonight. Let's get down to business. And our first electional opportunity is going to be for the 7th Lunar Mansion. And the 7th Lunar Mansion is a great one to kind of start off with. It is a mansion that is useful for material success and gain primarily. It definitely has kind of like financial or material security undertones to it, so it's really good for that. And it is a talisman that the texts tell us is for the acquisition of all good things. So there are a couple of other talismans that are very similar, that have kind of that same acquisition of all good things. And of course we go to them mostly in the waxing moon period, because the waxing moon period is also about gaining things. So the 7th Lunar Mansion is a really great kind of opportunity to go for. It's very flexible in what it can accomplish, but there is sort of like a financial theme that kind of runs through it. So it's most, in my opinion, is most successfully applied to financial attainment, which is not unusual. I feel like there are a lot of talismans that are like that. But the 7th Lunar Mansion is good because it's flexible. So there are some mansions that I feel like are better for like for gain from like employments, like wages, or like securing higher paying jobs. And then there are ones that I think are better for like merchandise, like buying and selling, kind of running your own business kind of a thing. And the 7th Lunar Mansion is one that I feel like is good for kind of anything you could potentially throw at it. So I like to recommend it a lot to people who kind of have unique or maybe like non-committal financial situations. But for the North American version of this chart, this is going to take place on May 21st at around 7:41 in the morning, so a little bit after sunrise. And here in our chart, we've got the moon in the 7th Lunar Mansion, and at this time, what is she doing? She's applying the sextile to Jupiter and Taurus. So after she moves into Cancer, she'll complete the sextile with Jupiter here. And Jupiter is, of course, a really great planet for these kinds of talismans, because Jupiter is a benefic. He wants to give, and not only does he want to give, but he wants to give kind of like the stability for people to be able to like continue to gain wealth, like not just like one-off fixes, but like stability to be able to kind of perpetually get themselves into a better financial position, or have kind of like that stable income if maybe they are in a situation where their income is unstable, or kind of like maybe a little unpredictable, or subject to change in some way. Like, so the So Jupiter here is really useful to kind of helping to even that out a little bit. Don't worry about the node here. I know I'll get questions about that. I don't really worry about the nodes when it comes to the planets, and the north node always has like an increasing power to it. So being conjoined to benefic is always a good thing for the north node anyway. But I don't really take too much of a focus on the nodes when it comes to planets. I consider them more issues for the sun and the moon to deal with than like Jupiter. Like Jupiter doesn't really care about the moon's node. The ruler of the first house of this chart is, of course, Mercury here. Oh, you know what? I'm just realizing that Mercury is conjoined the 12th house cusp, and I don't like that. So I never recommend talismans where the ruler of the first house is in the 12th house. And I follow what is kind of colloquially referred to as the 5-degree rule, which is a kind of an aphorism handed down to us by Ptolemy in the 1st century, who tells us that planets 5 degrees in front of a house cusp kind of get pulled into that house. So 7 and 11 is 4, and I don't like that. So I would read this as a 12th house Mercury, which is not great. So what we're going to do instead is we are going to move the time forward a tiny bit to get a little bit more space. And let me see if I'm not messing it up. So instead we're going to do like 752 to where now there is 8 degrees apart from Mercury and the 12th house cusp. To where I would now consider this an 11th house Mercury, so much better. And Mercury's doing okay, hanging out here in Taurus. We've just recently stationed direct, so we're moving forward just kind of slowly now. We're not in a bad aspect with Saturn. We're separated about 7 degrees from a square aspect with Mars, so I don't think this is too bad. I don't think this is anything really bad to worry about. I wouldn't necessarily read this as an afflicting square, but if you take a bit of a larger orb with squares, it might be something to consider. Maybe this isn't one that you would be very comfortable with. But I also really enjoy the part of fortune and Venus conjunction on the 2nd house cusp in this chart for this talisman have more of like a financial spin. I think that's kind of fun. But the moon's not afflicted by Mars or Saturn, or she's far enough away from the sun now. Mercury's not really afflicted by Mars or Saturn, depending on how you feel about that square. I don't really worry about it so much. But all in all, a good 7th lunar mansion just kind of start our lunation off with. The Western European version of this chart is very similar, except for we've got the moon now on the midheaven. So the moon in the 7th lunar mansion on the midheaven, she's still applying that sextile with Jupiter, a benefic planet who wants to give and stabilize and help us with financial situations or kind of whatever good thing we may be going to the 7th lunar mansion for. I recommend it for financial things, as I've said a few times now, but it doesn't have to specifically be for that. The ruler of the first house in this chart is still a Mercury, but now we've kind of switched to the Virgo from the Gemini ascendant. The ascendant is unafflicted by Saturn or Mars. Mercury, in my opinion, is unafflicted by Saturn or Mars. I think the square is far enough away to not have to worry about it here. I was trying to think, if you wanted to, as an idea, you could sacrifice the moon's angularity in this chart and go earlier. You could go like an hour earlier if you wanted to, like around 1427. And most everything here with the chart, I'm thinking about it. I might actually like this chart better. Let me see what's happening in this chart. So what I was looking for is kind of getting the sextile with Venus to the ascendant. That was my main idea. Pull the ascendant back far enough to get within the sextile with Venus. And now I'm noticing that how far is this? 8 degrees? 8 degrees from the opposition of Saturn? That's probably fine. But if you wanted to kind of have the ascendant somewhere between like 14 and 19 degrees Virgo to take advantage of the sextile with Venus to kind of give it a little bit more benefic support, absolutely you can do that. This chart might actually be really good for that because you can keep Mercury within the 9th house. Even though I don't think the ruler of the 1st and the 8th house is bad, especially within like a financial talisman because the 8th house represents other people's money. But there's definitely a place in this chart where you can get Venus in a good aspect with the ascendant very closely and keep Saturn far enough away from the ascendant. The 5 degrees also works for aspects to the house cusps too. So take a look into that. Look into if that works out for you and if you like that better. I do think I like this chart with the 14 degrees Virgo ascendant better than I did with the one that I had before. So look into that, see whichever one works better for you, maybe for your schedule, or which one you think looks best. And go to town. Go to Talisman making town. Talisman town. My next my next impulse was to call it Tally Town, but I was like, that sounds like something that somebody's already made, and may not be family friendly. For the Australian continent, the 7th Lunar Mansion Talisman is going to take place on May 22nd at around 9:30. This one's at 9:21 a.m. And it looks very similar to the North American one with the moon back on the ascendant, but the moon is now far enough into Gemini, to make the sextile with Jupiter much closer, which I think makes it a more solid, a more solid chart, if that makes sense. The closer the moon aspect is, usually kind of like the easier, the faster it is for the situation to resolve itself or to show progress, especially when coupled with a fast moon, which this is not. So having a closer aspect. So ideally, you would want a very close aspect with a very fast moon. That is an argument for quick completion or like quick progress being made, depending on what exactly it is. Like the Talisman probably doesn't have the whoozy whatsits to make massive change overnight, but we can see progress kind of no matter what. Things starting to move in the right direction. So that would be ideal. But what you don't want is a slow moon with a far away aspect, because it's just like double slowness, so you're not really going to see a lot of that movement on it, which can be frustrating for a lot of people, obviously, because who wants to wait for anything? Not me in today's world. And so having the moon closer in aspect with Jupiter while also being slow is a great way to kind of mitigate that and get kind of like more in the middle. So something to keep in mind. And that's kind of like, I say all that to kind of compare it to the North American version of the chart, where the moon was... That's the Western Europe one, where the moon was 9 degrees distant from the sextile with Jupiter. So that's kind of getting far, right? But the Australian one is 4 degrees, which is obviously much closer, because 4 is a smaller number than 9. You guys know that. But the Mercury here is again the ruler of the first house, separated far enough from the square of Mars to not have to worry about it. I think the conjunction of Venus and the part of fortune is in the first house, which I think is neat. Mars being pulled to the second house. But yeah, all in all, this is a good chart. I think this would be a really great chart for like specifically that sort of like wage negotiation or like increase in pay from a job kind of thing, because Jupiter's in the 10th house, which is associated with like career and jobs and stuff. So it's a way to kind of use your talisman chart to kind of shape your intention a little bit better. And that can help you get the most out of your talisman by playing into what it's kind of set up to perform well in. All right, our next electional opportunity is going to be kind of fun, because while we normally deal in Lunar Mansion talismans just because I feel like they're the most readily accessible, this is actually going to be an opportunity for a planetary talisman, which isn't something that we come across very often. And this is an opportunity for a moon planetary talisman, which is really fun because the moon is a little bit different to get talismans for, because she doesn't quite fit within the same kind of structure that we normally look to when we're looking to make planetary talismans. And we'll talk, I guess we'll just go ahead and start. But for the North American version, this chart is set for May 22nd at 16:04, so just after 4 o'clock. Yes. And we're going to have the moon on the midheaven in Cancer. And so when we're talking about like frameworks, things that we look for when we're making planetary talismans, we want the planet to be, we want the planet that we're after, the moon in this case, to be in a sign it does well in. So domicile exaltations. We don't normally go into smaller forms of dignity than that. Not really worth it. So the moon in Cancer is in her domicile. Excellent. The next thing is we want the moon or the planet to be, angular, either very, very, very close to the ascendant or very, very, very close to the midheaven. Here we have the moon close to the midheaven, so that's taken care of as well. And next we want to make sure it's either the moon's day or the moon's hour, and this is the moon's day. May 22nd is a Monday. So we have that taken care of. Where the moon gets a little bit different is that the final kind of piece is that we want to make sure that that planet is applying, or we want to make sure that the moon is applying to that planet next. So, if we're making a sun talisman, we want to make sure that the moon's next aspect is to the sun, right? Well, the moon can't apply to herself. So in a moon talisman, you can't have the moon applying to the moon. That would be super cool, but you can't do it. So what you do instead is you have the moon apply to a well-placed planet in some sense or some form of the word. I usually prefer to go for like benefic planets, like unafflicted, unproblematic benefic planets. I feel like that is safer, makes better talismans. But there might be situations where you choose to go to like a non-benefic planet or like a non-aligned planet. who is in a good sign for themselves as well. And that's like completely up to you and maybe what your focus is for the talisman. So in this case, we have the moon applying the conjunction with Venus, which I think works really well. Venus is in Cancer. They're both cold and wet planets. They have very similar kind of like feels and energy to these to them. The moon and Venus do, that I think to make a good partnership in something like this. So this would kind of be the setup that you're looking for it. The ruler of the first house is Venus, here in the 10th house. She's unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The ascendant is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The moon is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The only thing that is unfortunate in this situation is that the moon is slow in this part of the zodiac right now. So that might be something that you kind of consider, that might be something you consider playing into. The moon's perigee is in the middle of Leo right now, so having the moon in Cancer kind of puts you up against the moon getting really slow, and then you can't really have the moon in Taurus right now because the node is still there. So making moon talismans is a little kind of meh right now, but this is a really great opportunity that I was surprised to find, and I recommend it for anybody who might be looking for moon talismans. Kind of keeping in mind that hopefully by the time we get that as the node dips further into the Aries Libra axis, hopefully we'll have some moon and Taurus options kind of playing up right. Oh, and the other thing about the moon too is that this isn't gonna work, is it? The other thing about the moon is that she, of course, is also very sensitive to her phases. So this is a waxing moon in Cancer conjunct Venus talisman. And we're gonna, the sun just went through Taurus. So any moon in Taurus talismans are going to be waning for a while. And that's probably not the best type of moon energy to make a talisman of, unless you want something very specific. So all that to say that this might be one of the better options for moon talismans that we're going to get for a while. And it's going to take a little bit for the moon to kind of get some speed in Cancer. So we'll just do our best with this. I'm not sure I would recommend making it with anything like super precious because the moon is kind of slow here, but it can be a really great way to kind of get in touch with that energy now, when we have the option for it. And that's the name of the game here. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good is the game that I'm playing. Please put that on my tombstone. Unfortunately, there is not a moon opportunity for Western Europe, and we can talk about why, I suppose. Let me find that chart. Here we go. Unfortunately, there's not going to be a moon talisman opportunity for Western Europe. So now it starts Monday. Monday has started. Oh wait, can there be? Oh no, there's not going to be. Yeah, so this was the issue. I forgot this was the issue. Yeah, so there's not really a good option for Western Europe. The basic problem is that during Monday, I don't know why I did that. during the time that it is Monday, with the moon on the ascendant, she's 14 degrees away from her next aspect with Venus. No, I'm sorry, I lied. She's applying a sextile to Mercury. I don't really care for that very much. I don't think that's a good option. It's not the worst option, sure, but I don't think it's a great option, so I don't really recommend it. Mercury is not very stable, just has like a planetary influence, and is also moving very slowly because it's just turned direct. So I don't think that's a super great option. And then if we're going to put the moon on the midheaven like it is in the North American version of the chart, that sucks for us because she's still applying to Mercury. And so that's kind of our problem. And then by the time she breaks this application to Mercury, and kind of starts applying to Venus, we're in houses that we don't really want that to be in. And by the time the moon kind of comes back to the ascendant, you probably saw the sun has risen up again over the ascendant as he's wont to do starting Tuesday. So this is like the sun's day, Mars's day and the sun's hour, which isn't going to work for us. So that's why Western Europe isn't going to get a moon talisman opportunity. Very sorry. But Australia is going to get what is, in my opinion, the best moon talisman, which is going to take place on May 22nd at 1424. And here, their moon talisman option is really cool. Is really cool because you have the moon freshly in Cancer on the midheaven, and she's applying the sextile to Jupiter. And what's cool about that is that Jupiter is in Taurus, the exaltation of the moon, while the moon is in Cancer, the exaltation of Jupiter. So they have a mutual reception by exaltation, a true mutual reception by exaltation, and a very, very close aspect to take advantage of it. While the ruler of the first house is Venus here in the 10th house. So she's well placed, does okay in Cancer. She doesn't really have dignity there, but she doesn't have debility either. It's a day chart. She has water triplicity there. What else? The Venus is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The moon's unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. It's just a really good moon chart. Like, I don't often say that Australia has the better option of charts, but this is far and away a really great option for the moon talismans. To be fair, all of those charts could also serve as Lunar Mansion talismans for the 8th Lunar Mansion, which is a mansion that is associated with like victory and accomplishment. So you could absolutely take that aspect of it as well. If you didn't really want a moon planetary talisman, each of those will also function as 8th Lunar Mansion talismans. But since the moon planetary talisman aspect of it is much more rare, I recommend anybody who like has the time and energy and resources to pursue it as a moon talisman do that. But if you like really specifically need an 8th Lunar Mansion talisman to help secure some sort of like victory, then by all means that's an option available to you too at that time. Unless you're in Western Europe, I don't think I like Mercury as the moon's applying aspect for victory. In which case, just go back to sleep. Go back to sleep, Western Europe. Our next electional opportunity is going to be for the 9th Lunar Mansion, and the 9th Lunar Mansion is one that is a little double-edged in how it works. In a waning moon chart, it would not be uncommon to see it being utilized for cursing or harming other people. We're not all about that here. But in a waxing moon chart, it is more focused on protection from harm, about ensuring our magical defenses, safeguarding ourselves from spiritual gunk, from spiritual attacks, from malefic attachments that might cling on to us as we move hither and thither about our days and our interactions with others. And it's really good about like protection from these sort of like passive hexes, I guess we'll call it, that are primarily associated kind of like in the umbrella of the evil eye. The 9th Lunar Mansion is really helpful about keeping that at bay. So in looking at our election here, for the North American version, the 9th Lunar Mansion chart takes place on May 23rd at 5:22 in the morning, so you got to get up. And this focuses on the moon in the 9th Mansion in a conjunction with Venus in the 3rd house. A 3rd house, we don't typically think of the 3rd house as like a strong house or like an active house, but it's the moon's house of joy, so she can absolutely perform some talismanic work here. So we've got the moon in the 3rd house conjoined Venus. That's her next aspect, and we always really enjoy it when we have protective influences on the moon or kind of involved in any way for talismans, especially if they're about protections themselves. So having the moon apply to Venus, which is a benefic protective planet, is really helpful. I even really like the sun in the 1st house here. Venus rules the 1st house from Cancer in the 3rd, and she's unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The moon is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The ascendant is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. Mercury's chilling out there, that's fine. And there's even a sextile aspect here between Venus and the ascendant. So we have a lot of really good kind of safety. We have a good safety net here against these kinds of more sort of difficult influences. So a really great option to pick up to take advantage of if you're at all if you're looking to kind of shore up your own sort of magical defenses. Hopefully you're not in a situation where that's necessary, but better to have and not need than to need and not have. The Western European and Northern African version of this chart takes place on May 23rd at around 9 in the morning. This chart's set for 8:57. And here, they actually have the better option, in my opinion, compared to like the North American version. But here we've moved up that Moon-Venus conjunction in the 9th Mansion on top of the Ascendant, which is a more like normal-ish place. Has a lot more power, a lot more efficacy there. And again, just a nice kind of benefic influence here. Saturn and Mars aren't involved in this, which is great. The moon rules the 1st house from the 1st house. Both she and Venus, everybody involved here, Venus, the ascendant, and the moon are unafflicted, which is great because you don't want your protective planets to be afflicted. Obviously, don't set yourself up for failure. We don't want that. So I remember at one time I was trying to play around and see if there was a way I could get like Jupiter involved here. but I like to keep this more angular. And it might be something that you're able to do a little bit better depending on where you are in Western Europe and Northern Africa, how far away from the equator, where the houses kind of start to even out a little bit. But it was like obviously the more I tried to get this to be like 1 degree Cancer, the closer the Venus and the Moon went into the second house, and there's not really a lot of room in these houses right now, so have to hold on for bare life. But anyway, this is another really good chart for the ninth lunar mansion. I like it more than the North American version, just because that conjunction takes place on the ascendant, like almost exactly. And then finally, the Australian version of the ninth lunar mansion chart takes place on May 23rd at 1519, so about around 320. And I guess it's kind of fun that we've had the moon and Venus in like different places. It's like they were down here in the North American chart, and then they were here in the Western Europe and North African chart. So we have the moon in the ninth lunar mansion on the midheaven, and she's applying the conjunction with Venus. Venus, a benefic planet who definitely wants to protect and keep things safe, keep things stable as much as she's able to. Really performs well in situations like this. The Sun or Jupiter are alternatives that we would go to. Even Mars, sometimes, I would go to for something like this, depending on how kind of like you want it to be about it. Hopefully you understood what that meant. The ruler of the first house is Venus herself, who is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn at this time. The ascendant is unafflicted by Mars or Venus. The ascendant is unafflicted by Venus, which is great. The ascendant is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. And it's just a really safe, really nice chart. I even like the really angular Jupiter, even though I would have preferred it to be like on the ascendant, obviously. But the really angular Jupiter is a fun influence to kind of even things out. And I think the Australian version of this one is probably the better chart. But no, I lied. No. See, protective talismans where the conjunction of the protective influence is in the first house are super strong. So, yeah, there you go. Write that one down. So the next electional opportunity that we have to talk about is for the 11th lunar mansion, and the 11th lunar mansion is slowly becoming a crowd favorite to my patrons. Don't worry, buddy. I'll make them love you eventually. And the 11th lunar mansion is one of my favorites, so I'm excited to see kind of more people start to take notice of it. And it is a talisman that kind of has two kind of divergent wavy me just waving my hands like a lunatic, two kind of divergent powers that come together in a very unique way for our kind of society. So on the one hand, the 11th lunar mansion is focused on increasing wealth, so it has kind of wealth generating properties, money making abilities, kind of like we talked about with the 7th lunar mansion. But it also has a focus on gaining favors from authority. And where these two intersect it really nicely is in like corporate culture. So if you're somebody who, works for a company, as many of us do, then the 11th lunar mansion can be very helpful for helping you like get to the next step or get you in a position or a like department or in a situation where you're doing work that you really enjoy and you excel at. So I really enjoy the 11th lunar mansion for people who feel stuck in their careers, who aren't sure where to go, or who just feel like they deserve to be making more money than they are, which, let's face it, everybody is. That's just how it is. But that doesn't just mean that the 11th lunar mansion is only helpful for people who are sort of conventionally employed, we'll say. It does also have powers with like brand recognition and noticeability that can also be applied to like the general public. So there is sort of like a utilization here for people who are self-employed. But the 11th lunar mansion works amazingly well for people who are kind of more conventionally employed. That being said, we do have opportunities for the 11th lunar mansion, but they're not what I would call super awesome opportunities for it, especially compared to like others in the past that we've talked about. And it comes down to like two things, in which we'll talk about it. But for the North American version, this chart takes place on May 25th at 1828. So around 6:30, we have the moon in the 11th lunar mansion, conjoined the midheaven, and she is applying this trine to Jupiter after she changes signs. And this is kind of the first problem. So I kind of set myself up for this when we began talking about how the moon operates within elections. If the moon is slow, then it stretches it out. Like there's no hurry. Don't expect it to if the moon is slow, don't expect it to solve the problem quickly. And then that gets coupled, especially with if the moon has a long way to go before her next aspect, that also stretches the time out. And this chart has both of those things. The moon is slow. The perigee is at like 13 degrees, so she's like just gotten past her slowest point, and is now even just beginning to start to speed up again. And the aspect between her and Jupiter is very far out. What is this? 16 degrees out, so very far, to the point where we might start to, many people would probably start to consider this being void. So void moons aren't terrible. They just make things really slow, to where they're not what we would call very, it doesn't make them attractive, it doesn't make them very useful, like practical, because they slow things down. There's obstacles that come up and can be difficult to get across. So all this combines in a talisman together, which can make it very difficult to utilize successfully, but makes it almost impossible to utilize quickly. So I can explain. Basically, how I would recommend individuals using this, because the perigee is here. Like, this is where the moon's perigee is going to be. This is where the moon is going to be slow for a while. If you are in a situation where you are looking to make quick changes, like if you have an interview tomorrow, this is not going to help you do that. It's not going to help. But if you're somebody who was looking for direction in your career, more long-term, more like long-term goals, this can be a really great talisman for helping you kind of figure out where that is and getting there. So it just really kind of depends on where you are, what you're looking for specifically. If you're looking for quick change, this isn't it. If you're looking for like a life path correction, like a career path correction, this can probably get you there. This can be kind of that slow burn that pulls you towards where you need to be. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's better than if you had done the same thing with a fast moon or the moon applying to a planet more quickly. That's not how this works. But that's just this is me helping you manage expectations if you choose to move forward with the 11th Lunar Mansion Talisman. And that's the same either in this one or the Western Europe and Northern African one or the Australian one. They're each going to have this problem. The Western Europe and North African version of this chart takes place on May 26th at 7:38 a.m. And you're going to look for the moon in the 11th Lunar Mansion in the 3rd house. A lot of numbers just went through my head, and I was not sure which one to say. She's still applying that trine to Jupiter. It's pretty far out still. The moon is slow here still. But the moon also rules the 1st house in this chart. But you can have a choice here. You can have the Cancer ascendant, or you can have the Virgo ascendant. I'm sorry, I did it again. The Gemini ascendant, and have Mercury as the ruler of the 1st house if you prefer. And depending on which one you pick is up to you. If you have if your midheaven is in like Taurus or Gemini, then maybe the Mercury ascendant works better for you. If your midheaven is in Leo or Cancer, maybe the Cancer ascendant works best for you. It would be kind of how I would go about it. But those same warnings from the North American version of the chart are still here. Don't expect a quick turnaround from this. If you do get a quick turnaround from this, that is the miracle. Like, there has been divine intervention on your behalf, and not like demonic intervention, but like God smiled on you. Oh, and the joke about my comment of like I did it again when I said Virgo instead of Gemini is that's how I wrote it. I wrote 0 degrees Cancer or 29 degrees Virgo, because obviously I think Virgo comes before Cancer in the zodiac. Clearly that does. The Australian version of this chart is, of course, very similar, just takes place in a different house. Here we've got the moon in the 11th mansion. She's still applying that trine to Jupiter. It's going to be a slow burn on this one to get good results, so just be patient and do your best with it. The ascendant in this one is going to be Venus ruled, who's in the 10th house, so this would be the one that I would bet on the most being a job change, clearly. But the ascendant is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The ruler of the 1st house is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The moon is far enough away from Mars to not be a problem. It's just that moon slowness and how far away she is from the from the trine here of Jupiter. That's going to slow it down. But just go into it expecting that. Go into it needing that slowness, needing that kind of course correction, and this will be a really great talisman. Whew, all right, are you still here? Because we are still going. We have several more. we have a good amount of elections left. So I hope that you're not having election fatigue, that you're properly hydrated, and you have stretched recently. Our next electional opportunity is going to be for North America. No, I lied. Our next electional opportunity is going to be for Western Europe, North Africa, and Australia only. North America is not going to get this one. And this is going to be for a 13th Lunar Mansion Talisman. The 13th Lunar Mansion is one that we use to create erotic love between individuals, basically. It's about relationships, but it is more specifically about the erotic or sexual side of relationships. Outside of that, though, the 13th Lunar Mansion is also about fertility and conception. So people who are looking to conceive, the 13th Lunar Mansion can be very helpful for, and also for overcoming various forms of sexual dysfunction. It's a little bit more male-oriented in this regard, a little bit more focused on like erectile dysfunction kind of situations, performance, anxiety. It's not going to leave women hanging. So no matter who you are or how you identify, the 13th Lunar Mansion will be able to help you out with these kinds of situations. So make sure to look towards it if you have any need for any of those situations. Always very handy. In the Western Europe, North African version of this chart, we're going to have the moon in the 13th Lunar Mansion here in the 3rd house. And at this time, she's going to apply the sextile to Venus in the ascendant. And I really like this configuration the way that it is. Venus is, of course, the planet of sexuality, of sexual health, and even involved in conception and relationships, obviously. So I really like Venus here in the 1st house. I like that it's the moon's next aspect as well. Just a really great, strong connection with this planet. Like, I could not have asked for this better, except for maybe the moon-Venus conjunction could have happened here. That would be cool too. But just a really nice connection here. The ascendant and the moon and Venus are unafflicted by Mars and Saturn. Just a really great, safe, strong place here, which is really useful since there's so much kind of like anxiety involved in sexuality and stuff anyway, and danger involved in like fertility and conception and pregnancy and stuff. So just really great to have. I really love to see it. A really good option for this chart, or a really good option for this talisman. I apologize. The Australian version of this chart takes place on May 28th at 7 o'clock at 1900. And here we're going to have the moon in the 13th mansion on the midheaven. And she's going to apply that sextile to Venus again. Really love Venus as the connecting planet here. I love that Venus is angular. We didn't have that Venus. We don't have the Venus in the 1st house like we did in the Western Europe, North and African chart, which I thought was a really great connection. Here, let me see. So actually looking at this, I'm not a big fan of Venus being conjoined the 8th house. I think that's a really bad house to be involved in sexuality, even though I know that there are people who work with a system of astrology that associates the 8th house with sexuality. I do not. So what we are going to do instead is we're going to move time forward a little bit to try to find, this might have to be it, to try to find the balance between the moon hanging onto the midheaven by about 5 degrees like this, so 3 degrees separate, a little less, and Venus being now 6 degrees away from the 8th house custody in the 7th house. So my initial idea with this, because I didn't look at the degrees very closely, and I just saw Venus in the 7th, is that this could be a great chart for finding somebody. A lot of times the 13th Lunar Mansion is used to kind of reignite the spark, like the kind of like sexual spark of long-term couples. I say that, but this could also be a good option for that too. It's just like the connection with Venus in the 7th house makes it a little bit more other person focused. And so a lot of times that can be used to find somebody who is compatible with the talisman holder. But it can also be used kind of as I described it to kind of like inspire that connection with a significant other, no matter the length of that relationship. The ruler of the 1st house is Saturn here, which is fine, Saturn's unafflicted by Mars or the Sun. The ascendant itself is unafflicted by Mars. Venus, the moon is far enough away from the opposition of Saturn that we don't have to worry about it, but we wouldn't worry about it anyway because Saturn is the ruler of the 1st house. And Venus is also unafflicted. So just another good chart that we can kind of lean into in a specific way to get a particular outcome for. So definitely look into that if that sounds interesting or like something you might need. Do not use it to compel somebody to have sex with you, please. Like, let's not be gross. So, you're probably wondering why things look different all of a sudden. Well, as I was sitting down to edit the video, I discovered that the last 20 minutes of the recording were gone. Not sure what happened to it, but it no longer exists. So I now have to re-record those sections. Thankfully, the recording ended at a very convenient place after I got finished talking about the 13th Lunar Mansion talismanic collections, so we can just kind of jump right into where we were before. So our next electoral opportunity is going to be for the 16th Lunar Mansion. And the 16th Lunar Mansion is a really great mansion when it comes to financial goals. Kind of like we talked about with the 11th Lunar Mansion, where its financial kind of powers were a little bit more in the area of like conventional employment, wages, kind of like being reimbursed for like one's labor, essentially. The 16th Lunar Mansion kind of comes to it from the other side, where it's a little bit more focused on commerce. So very useful for people who are maybe self-employed in retail. It's very useful for like making money through customers, through like the buying and selling of goods, as opposed to like making money through a salary, which is more the 11th Lunar Mansion. But the 16th Lunar Mansion also has powers when it comes to like debt negotiation, repaying debts, having debts forgiven, which can be another really great avenue to explore, especially in today's world where many people are saddled with student loan debt or medical debts, depending on where you live. The 16th Lunar Mansion is really great to be able to kind of work getting those paid back or renegotiating rates, refinancing. That's where the 16th Lunar Mansion shines. Or, if you don't want to approach it that way, then for that sort of increase in commerce. This is a mansion or an election, where we do not have availability for it in Western Europe or North Africa. So this is going to be a North America and an Australian chart, sort of exclusive. And so for the North American version of our chart, this takes place on May 30th at 1547, so about 3:45. And here we have the moon in the 16th Lunar Mansion on the ascendant, and at this time she's applying the square to Venus, who is pulling a lot of weight in our elections. In this video, there's a lot of Venus connections that I didn't really realize happened until I've actually sat down and noticed the pattern while recording the video. But we have the connection to Venus, and Venus is a good planet to have for this kind of thing. This is a mansion where I think Mercury really shines very highly. Just because Mercury is also all about that sort of that commerce. Mercury rules commerce and trade and merchandising. So in that aspect, Mercury is very, very highly regarded in 16th Lunar Mansion talismans. Venus, on the other hand, she is a benefic planet that can provide money. She can provide financial resources. I'm not going to take that away from her. But Venus's power is more about like mediating and uniting and compromising. So in this way, the Venus here can be really great for like that negotiation aspect of it when it comes to like having debts forgiven or like renegotiating debts or things like that. That's where this mansion is going to, or this particular election for this mansion is going to come in very well, because that Venus connection really helps facilitate and connect the two sides, you and your debtor. Venus also rules the first house in this election. And the moon is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. Venus is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. She's getting close to this conjunction, but it's really not something that we're going to worry about until much later. And partly also because this conjunction will not perfect before Venus goes retrograde later this summer. So we're not really going to worry about it very much. But all in all, this is a great election to kind of follow for the 16th Lunar Mansion. It's definitely one that you kind of want to maintain. Lee's here. He says hello. Isn't he cute? Hopefully, we'll see what damage he causes. The Australian version of our 16th Lunar Mansion election takes place on May 31st at 14:23, and it's situated very similarly, like almost exactly the same. Well, I guess it is exactly the same as the North American version, with the moon in the 16th mansion here on the ascendant, still applying that square to Venus, which is now a little bit closer. So we have kind of a closer connection between these two planets than we did in the North American version. Again, the Venus here is going to be really useful for that sort of like renegotiation, that talking people into things. And so we'll use it to, talk people into making us not have to pay them back, or talk people into helping us get better financial terms on a loan. So while Western Europe and Northern Africa didn't get a 16th Lunar Mansion talisman, what they do have is a sort of unique opportunity for an 18th Lunar Mansion talisman, which will be the next election that we'll talk about. And the 18th Lunar Mansion is one that is more focused on healing. And it's always a great talisman to get. I had kind of a weird experience with it, a weird/scary experience with it when I was first kind of starting out with astrological magic. So I was really wary of this mansion for a long time until I kind of got a better handle on it. And the 18th Lunar Mansion is, like I said, it's a healing talisman. But it's a healing talisman that is much more focused on like the recovery of health. So it's really useful to use when you're sick, to help overcome a disease, be cured of it, or to reduce its impact in your life. The 18th Lunar Mansion is really great for. It's not one I would recommend to healthy people who are looking to avoid illness. you definitely want to give it. You definitely want it to have a mission. You want it to have an enemy to fight. We'll say that's where this mansion does very well in. And so our opportunity for the 18th Lunar Mansion, this is specifically for Western Europe and Northern Africa, it's going to take place on June... Oh, wait, please. It's going to take place on June 2nd at 14:06, so just a little bit after 2 p.m. And here we're going to keep the moon in the third house, in the third house in the 18th Lunar Mansion. And here she's going to apply this nice trine to Venus in Cancer. So a really nice water trine involving a benefic planet. And, you know, benefic planets like Venus, Venus is health affirming. She's not as health affirming as like the Sun or Jupiter. The Sun I would consider the most health affirming, and then Jupiter would be like the second most, like our number 2 there, with Venus being the third. And I don't mean that as like anything necessarily bad about Venus. It's just these other 2 planets are a little bit more firmly associated with the ability to produce health, while Venus is able to do that to a lesser extent. But here we have a good option for this. The moon is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The ruler of the first house is Mercury here in Taurus, who is also unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. The ascendant degree itself is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn, and you definitely want to make sure that those positions are safe in health talismans. Those are the ones. Health talismans are, you know, to be fair, you want to avoid these kinds of difficult afflictions in any talisman that you make as much as you possibly can. But especially when it comes to like health or body talismans, you want to make sure that you have yourself protected from, because you're already in a situation where you're pretty vulnerable. And the last thing that you want to do is have some sort of like malefic or difficult influence focused in or involved in a working that's focused on the body. It's just not good. So we're going to look into this nice benefic trine here between the moon and Venus, and this can also be one that we can kind of focus on a little bit, because with the moon applying to Venus in Cancer, maybe this is a talisman that you really strongly consider if you're currently struggling with like a cancer kind of illness. So Cancer in astrology represents the stomach, the breast, and the chest, so it can be useful for like breathing conditions, stomach conditions, and Venus herself is focused on like the kidneys and sexual health and like UTIs and things like that. So if you are, you know, an individual who's currently struggling with any illness in kind of those areas of the body, the Venus areas or the Cancer areas, this could be a really great talisman to look into, because it's a little bit focused on those areas itself. So if those are, you know, areas of the body you're currently having issues with, then this can be a really great talisman to help you overcome those or lessen their impact on your life. So our next and our final election opportunity for today's video is going to be for the 19th Lunar Mansion. And the 19th Lunar Mansion is one that we haven't heard much from for a while, because the nodes have been in, you know, Scorpio and Taurus. We're kind of getting towards the end of that era now. So now the nodes have moved far enough away to where they don't impede the moon, which is in this mansion. Of course, we have to deal with another issue now, which is Saturn in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces will square the early degrees of Sagittarius, which form the last bit of this mansion. So we have to kind of find that sweet spot now, where if the moon is in Sagittarius, then we're not going to be able to use this mansion. But if we can keep the moon kind of towards the beginning or the middle of the mansion, we should be able to find time to work with it, like in this time here. The 19th Lunar Mansion is one that is primarily focused on women's health issues. So it's useful for uterine health, helping to manage menstruation, helping to assist one in the transition through menopause, and also for conception and protection during pregnancy and the childbirthing process. It's really helpful for those kinds of things. It has non-female specific applications through the usage of magical safeguarding in a way that is very reminiscent of the 9th Lunar Mansion. But overall, those are its big highlights. It's very focused on female reproductive health, female hormonal health, and magical safeguarding as kind of a secondary option. So taking a look at our election, the North American version of this takes place on June 2nd at 1857, so just before 7 p.m. And here we have the moon in the 19th mansion in the first house, and she's applying this very, very close trine to Venus in Cancer. So this very strong connection with Venus, which is a feminine-coded planet, in Cancer, which is a feminine-coded sign, is a good indication that this would be a really great talismanic opportunity for approaching it from that women's health perspective. The moon is unafflicted by Mars or Saturn. We don't have to worry about, we're too far to worry about this square to Saturn right now. Mars rules the first house. We wouldn't really worry about afflictions from Mars anyway, but Mars is also unafflicted by Saturn or the Sun. All in all, just a good contender chart for this kind of practice. So one thing to note, I guess, is that the trine between the Venus and the Moon is very, very close, like less than, as you can see, less than half a degree apart, which is about an hour of clock time. And the reason why I mention that is because individuals who might be looking to make this talisman in the Mountain or the Pacific time zones might miss this. They might not get this trine. Like by this time, the trine may have, by the time the Moon comes to the ascendant in their location, the trine may have moved, may have started to separate, and now we're applying the, I believe, square to Saturn at that point, which is not good. We don't want that at all in this. So for those individuals, for people who might be seeing it, pulling it up from their chart, for their location, being like, oh, this is applying a square to Saturn, what do I do? I would recommend doing this earlier. I would recommend doing it instead when the Moon is in the third house, so somewhere around 4 o'clock time. 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Do that instead. Here you'll have a Virgo ascendant with Mercury as the ruler of the first house. The Moon still applying the trine to Venus, but now closer. Now further apart to where you'll be able to get that actual connection, that the actual trine to Venus instead of the square to Saturn. So I would recommend that. If you aren't able to get the trine from your location with Moon on the ascendant, go to the Moon in the third house. Leap. And then our final election that we're going to talk about, the 19th Lunar Mansion from Western Europe and Northern Africa, is going to take place on June 2nd. This chart is set for 20:01, so at 10 p.m. 8 p.m. And it's going to look almost exactly the same as the North American chart. Here the Moon is going to be in the 19th mansion on the ascendant, still applying that trine to Venus. I don't know why he keeps turning this way. He's such a little nut. I keep trying to get him to face the camera, but he just keeps turning away. Now he's going to be camera shy. That we're getting towards the end. That or he wants me to scratch him in a specific place, and that's the only way he can get it. So again, we're going to lean in this trine, this benefic trine to Venus, which is all about providing health and wellness. And here, especially with this strong female energy exemplified in this trine with this Venus in Cancer, is just perfect for what we want it for, which is for, female health problems. So absolutely great. Very fun. We can find times that match more specifically towards the energy or the application that we're trying to use it for. So, same story. The ascendant and the Moon are unafflicted by Saturn. The ruler of the first house is Mars, who is also unafflicted by Saturn or the Sun. Just a really great chart, a really great option for the 19th Lunar Mansion. I think I like the Western European, Northern African version a little bit better than the North American version because there's more space from that Saturn, which many people might feel anxious about. But no matter where you are, no matter which option you have, they're both great. So definitely look into that if you're at all experiencing issues around this at all. But all right, everybody, thank you guys so much for watching. That's all the elections that I have for you today. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me. We had a lot to get through. We had a lot of talismans to talk about. And not only did we have a lot of talismans, but we had a lot of talismans that did different things. And those are my favorite time periods, when not only there's a lot of talismanic options for us to work with, but the ways that they can be utilized are varied to help as many people going through as many different situations as possible. So I really enjoy times like this. And hopefully there was something here that spoke to you that you're looking to pursue, and hopefully you get amazing results from it to help you with whatever situation that you're facing. I wanted to give a special thank you to my patrons. Thank you all so much for being here and for watching and for your support. And if you're interested in supporting the channel and supporting Lee's rubbing his face on microphones habit, check out the Patreon. There are a lot of great incentives to join that, including group mentoring and office hours, community building stuff. There's free talismanic goodies when those become available, and even a 6-hour introduction to astrological magic mini course for beginners and veterans alike to get something out of.